Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for February 2023. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator, and this month we're going to be talking about shapes. The built-in shapes like squares, rectangles, circles, etc., as well as the functions to manipulate them. So if you want to follow along on today's lesson, you can just open Total Quilter and follow along. If you don't want to follow along, you can just sit back and watch. Today, like I said earlier, we're going to be talking about shapes. And today during our video, if I want you to just regular click, I'm just going to say the word click. If I want you to right click, I will say right click specifically, so that means a right click on the mouse instead of a normal left click. And if I want you to click and drag, that's going to be a left click, drag the mouse, and then let off the mouse. So it's going to be a click, hold the button down, drag, and then let off the mouse. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. So built-in shapes, what do we have? We're not going to talk about the custom shapes, which are things like bears and birds and things like that. We're going to be talking about the geometric shapes like squares, rectangles, circles, triangles, etc. And they're all located right here under this tool. Now normally it comes up and says rectangle, and this will change based on whatever the last tool you selected was. But if you click it, you'll see you've got a choice of a rectangle, ellipse or circle, a triangle, a pentagon, or a hexagon. So those are the built-in shapes. So if we click one like a rectangle, now the rectangle is attached to our cursor, and you can see that the cursor changed from a pointer to a crosshair with a little rectangle by it to tell us that we're going to make a rectangle. If you want to just make an arbitrarily sized rectangle, all you need to do is click and drag. So that's clicking and holding down the mouse and dragging, and you can drag up, down, around to change the shape. And you can see in the lower right next to my shape I've got measurements telling me what I'm making. Really doesn't matter so much what you make when you drag it, because you can always adjust that, and we'll go over that here in a second. But you can move this all around, make any kind of shape you want. Now if you want to constrain the shape to a perfect square or perfect circle, perfect triangle, whatever, what you want to do is hold down the control key while you drag. So if I press the control key on my keyboard now, you can see that it's switched to a perfect square. And if I drag holding down that control key, you can see that it stays a perfect square. And then if I let off the mouse, you'll see that it has changed or stayed a perfect square. So I've got perfect dimensions on all sides. Now what if I didn't want a perfect square? I could select it, and I can use the handles here, which are these black boxes, to change it. So if I click and drag one of them, I will expand it, but not symmetrically. If I undo that, and if I click one of the corner boxes and drag, that will change it symmetrically, so it'll stay perfect shape. Now if I want to make it a specific size, what I would do is come over here to my properties box, click the transform tab, and here I can enter my width in either millimeters, which is what I'm in now, or inches. So if I wanted an actual 4" by 4" square, I could click inches, and I've got a maintain aspect ratio check box here. That means if I change the width, the height will change automatically to adjust. So since I have a perfect square, if I change this to 4 inches and click apply, it's going to change it to 4 inches in both directions. If I didn't have maintain aspect ratio, and let's say I wanted a 5 by 7, and I wanted the 7 to be the height and the 5 to be the width, I could change the width to 5, and I could change the height to 7, and click apply. And you can see now, let me double click my magnifying glass to get it back centered on the screen. And you can see now I've got a perfect 5x7. And I'm in millimeters mode, so even though in my transform box I can switch back and forth between millimeters and inches, my ruler, my measurements down here are still in metric because I've got it in metric mode. If you want to go to inches mode, right click on the ruler, select inches, and now I'm in inches mode. So it's just that simple. Okay, so that's rectangles. Let's go ahead and delete that. I'm going to do it with this shortcut right here. If I choose a different shape like a circle or an ellipse, if I drag it without holding down control, I can make any arbitrary sized ellipse that I want. Again, if I hold down control and drag, it will keep it a perfect circle. Now here's an important point. I'm holding down control on my keyboard right now, and I'm holding down the button on the mouse. If I let off control before I let off the mouse, what's going to happen is it's going to go back to a non-perfect circle. So you always want to keep control down and let off the mouse, and then have it go back, and then have it stay a perfect circle. All right, so let's go ahead and select and delete that. Let's look at our other shapes. We've got a triangle, so I can click and drag a triangle. If I want a perfect triangle, again, hold down control, and I get an equilateral triangle. If I let off control, I can make it any size that I want to. Let's go ahead and delete that and look at pentagon, which I'm sure you'll be able to figure out makes a pentagon. Okay, and lastly, hexagon. So those are my built-in shapes. So hexagon. So again, if I hold down control, now I've got a perfect hexagon. If I let off the mouse and control, I have my perfect hexagon. Okay, so those are the built-in shapes. So I'm going to select and delete that. And what I want to go over now is something called Boolean functions. Now, Boolean is a mathematical term used in algebra and other types of mathematics, named after the mathematician George Boole. For our purposes today, it determines how, when we have multiple shapes overlapping, how we can manipulate the resulting overlaps. So let's start with circles, as it's easy to see. So I'm going to pick a circle. I'm going to hold down control and make a perfect circle here. I'll make it fairly big. Okay, and I'm going to recenter that. And I'm going to select it, and I'm going to make a duplicate of it. So I'm going to use this duplicate icon right here to make a duplicate, and then I'm going to bring it up so it's somewhat aligned. If I want them perfectly aligned, I can select them all. So I'm just going to drag a box around everything, and then I'm going to use my alignment tool here to align the centers. Let's align the vertical centers, which will make them perfectly aligned like that. And I'm going to move this one, the top one, over a little bit. So let me select it and move it over. Okay, and I probably messed up the alignment, but it looks pretty close enough. Okay, so I'm going to again double click my magnifying glass to recenter them on the screen. And now I've got two overlapping shapes. Now, what can I do with it when I've got two overlapping shapes? Well, I've got this icon right here, which is currently not lit up, which lets me do what we call Boolean functions with two or more overlapping shapes. So we're not going to get complicated with more than two. We're just going to stay with two so you get an idea what they do. If I select one of them, you can see that this icon is still not lit up, because in order for this icon to work, I need to select more than one shape. So I'm going to come back and draw a box around all of them to select both of them. All right, and now you can see my icons lit up. And if I click the down arrow next to it, or just click it, you can see I've got four different functions here. I've got trim, weld, intersect, and exclude. All right, so those are my 4 functions. So let's take a look at trim first. If I click trim, what's going to happen is the topmost shape is going to act like a cookie cutter and take out part of the bottom shape. So if I select the top shape and slide it across, whoops, let me do that again. Let me get right over it where I've got my hand. There I go. Now I slide it across. You can see what I've really got here is a half moon shape and still a circle, because what this did was it cut out this bottom circle in the shape of the top circle. All right, so I am going to do an undo for undoing the move, and I'm going to undo my Boolean function. All right, so now I'm going to reselect everything, and we'll go to the next one. Okay, so the next one is weld, and that's pretty obvious. If I click it, what's going to happen is it's going to take both of those shapes, eliminate any of the overlapping areas, and weld them into one shape. So what I've got now is just one shape left in the shape of what that overlap looked like. Okay, so I'm going to undo that and reselect everything, and let's go to the next one. Okay, the next one is intersect. And so what that's going to do is it's going to leave this intersection here where the 2 shapes intersect and eliminate everything else. So if I click that, you can see that what I've got now is just basically that overlap. So if you want to make a football shape, this is a great way to do it. Okay, and keep everything nice and symmetrical. So once again, I'm going to undo, and let's go to our very last one. I'm going to select everything, and our last one is exclude. So what exclude is going to do is basically the opposite of an intersect. I click it, what's going to happen is it's going to exclude this intersection. Now it doesn't look like anything happened because my shapes are not filled. Okay, and obviously because we're doing this with unfilled shapes, you don't need to fill your shapes to get this to happen. But if I select this outer left or rightmost shape here, you can see that what I've got is a half moon and a half moon. And it looked like I still had that middle shape because of the way they were aligned. Okay, so I'm going to put it back, and one of the functions that's not here is a function that actually splits this up and gives us all 3 shapes. So it would give us this right shape, the left shape, and the center shape. That's not here. So how do we do that? Well, let me do an undo, and I've got my 2 shapes again, and what I'm going to do is select them, okay, and I'm going to make a copy of them. So I'm going to come here to my copy icon and copy them, okay, and now what I'm going to do is do my first function, which is my intersect. So I'm going to do an intersect, and that leaves this shape here. Now what I'm going to do is paste my original 2 circles back. So what I've got now is 3 shapes, and you can see over here in my sequence view I've got these 2 artworks that I just pasted back in selected, and what I'm going to do now on both of those, so I do not have that centerpiece selected, so we're not going to affect it. So now what I'm going to do is do my exclude, and what I've got now is all 3 separate pieces. So I've got this piece, so let's go ahead and color that. I'll fill it with the red that it is, okay, and I've got this piece over here, which we'll go ahead and fill, and I'll go ahead and leave that red. But let's now select this inner piece. Now I can try and select it by pointing at it, but it's easier to select it over here in the sequence view. And if I fill that with a different color, like let's pick this light color here and fill it, you can see now that I've got my 3 independent shapes. All right, so that is how we manipulate shapes and how we create them. And by using these functions, you can create a wide variety of complicated shapes. All right, so I want to thank you for watching and invite you to come back next month for another edition of Total Quilter Monthly.